There's a term in Zen called Shikantaza, which is very clever. It seems to refer to a practice, and in Soto Zen, or one form of Zen, it's like the central practice. But of course, it's not really a practice. And one way of pointing to that in Zen is to say that in the Zen center I went to, they would often say 1 minute of sitting is 1 minute of being a Buddha. That it's really just about sitting and inhabiting your Buddha nature, which is pristine, uncaused, doesn't come and go, doesn't need to be attained. And if that were a practice, it would be called Shikantaza. I don't know how any particular teacher teaches it or talks about it specifically. There's probably some slight variations, but again, it's a clever and kind of a funny thing that it seems to be a practice. And probably to many people at first, practitioners, it does seem to be a practice, something you can get better at and perfect and figure out how it works and fine tune it and whatever, like any practice. Probably some people are intuitively oriented toward it, where it just makes sense. They know what that means to sit. And essentially, I guess as my Zen teacher would have said, it's sit and don't make anything. It's a non-fabricating practice, perhaps we could say. It's also maybe better defined or best defined and described by what it isn't. In my book, I have it somewhere in there, chapter or section called about natural meditation, which is essentially Shikantaza. And natural meditation is the act or practice of not trying to create a special state, not trying to create a meditative state, not trying to modify our experience to some idealized state or experience. It's not rejecting anything. It's not looking for anything in particular. It's not about imagining something. It's not about attenuating or disrupting the mind, the imagination or thought that may arise, of course, and will. It's not about achieving anything. It's not about finding or achieving an insight. Perhaps you could say it's about noticing something, like like mere noticing, but even that is without a strategy. The noticing is just happening. And when we relinquish our strategies, we set aside our intentions, beliefs, preconceptions about meditation and about experience, then you could say natural meditation reveals itself. So as a quote-unquote practice, that's sort of how it works. Also, there may come a time in anyone's practice, process, unfolding, whatever, where all of a sudden you just get it. You totally know what it is. You know what natural meditation is. You know what Shikantaza, what it means. And it might be a bit of a laughing moment that you thought it was something you were doing before, a practice. So it's a kind of koan, actually, in a sense, that's handed to you as a Zen practitioner or as a non-Zen practitioner. The koan of how do you practice all that is? How do you practice that which doesn't come and go, which is never apart from you? How do you practice Buddha nature? There are a lot of ways of approaching this or speaking about it poetically and otherwise. Dogen just sort of called it practice enlightenment. Practice enlightenment, meaning practice is enlightenment, enlightenment is practice. There aren't two things. They aren't two processes. They aren't two. And if you have that moment, that aha moment, where meditation just kind of does itself, like you close your eyes and it's just obvious. There's no particular practice at all. That may just be your practice orientation for the rest of your life, perhaps. It doesn't have to be. There are other ways to meditate, right? There are other approaches where you may have a specific technique. There are many. But I will say that generally, if that insight has arisen, which is not the same thing I would say as like an awakening insight necessarily, but it is an insight of the nature of natural meditation or Shikantaza. If that has arisen for you, then I would say that almost certainly that will be the background of all your practice ongoing. Will be the default. So to draw a parallel with the kind of awakening process, which of course does very much parallel, you could say that the shift is the shift between being someone discrete and apart from, with its own individual will, practicing, to practice just practicing itself, right? Something like I wish you could all see this. She's laughing for the camera. She's laughing at the idea of someone practicing. Right. And all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh. And you may even suddenly notice that the sense of being a practitioner or practicer hasn't been there for a while and you didn't even notice it. That's another possibility, right? And that can hit you as strange and funny. So that's a kind of transition to this, like everything is practice. Everything is meditation. Like the universe is meditating itself. Meditation is meditating. There's no one doing it. There's no way to do it. There's no right or wrong way. It's just obvious. Sit down, there it is, right? And then sometimes don't even sit down and there it is, right? We just often, if we're up and about and active and so forth, we're focused and or sometimes thinking. So we're not quite as knowingly in touch with that practice that's not a practice, with that meditation that's always happening. So there's still value to sitting, of course. There's still value to reminding yourself that there's nothing to remind yourself of. So that's an important insight. It's an important maturity in practice, in the unbinding of identity. But there's more, right? So then I think the best way I can say this is that what may dawn is that what was very cleverly packaged as a vehicle for realization to the ego, as a vehicle for enlightenment to the seeker, so that they felt like they had something they could work with to practice and have a technique to perfect and master. Very cleverly packaged that way. Very clever packaged by who knows. But ingenious, really, to lead you to that initial insight that there is no practitioner and that meditation is already meditating. It's already here. It's kind of happening all the time. And then we see that even that is a cleverly packaged catalyst, a vehicle of deeper insight into the nature of reality itself, what we call physical experience, reality, objects, stuff, life in 3 dimensions and in technicolor and sound and sensations, all of it starts to reveal its nature to us through the lens of this always ever present knowingness. So it's kind of where unbound consciousness or oceanic consciousness or one mind starts to meet no mind. Starts to meet that which is beyond consciousness. And this is an interesting one because there are many people out there who have a lot of clarity around a lot of this stuff, and they will assert that there's no possibility beyond consciousness, right? No possibility of realization going beyond consciousness. And I don't say that to be divisive in any way. I just say it to alert anyone who's interested in how this could possibly go deeper to really looking closely at their experience and seeing that it can go deeper, right? That it can, something more can drop away. I'll say that's probably the clearest thing I can say about it. Something more can drop away. And that's the very basic identity structure, which you may not be identifying as anything. You may not be identifying it as awareness or consciousness, but it has an effect. And through this same lens of not doing that started out as an apparent practice for the practitioner and became this universal doing, non-doing meditation, now somehow can actually turn in on itself and see its own lack of essence. And this isn't done through agency, and it's not done through any kind of perspective, personal perspective, universal perspective of a self, or otherwise. It's not done through a perspective, and yet it is done. Something clarifies here. And the attunement is availability in the same way we were available to our own seeking mind that felt like there was something beyond. In the same way we became available to the vastness and the ever-present experience of awareness or unbound consciousness. It's the same kind of availability, right? But it's now availability to penetrate the particular, one sound at a time, one sensation at a time. Or it can be precision of curiosity and intellect even to question, as we were talking about yesterday in one of the Q&As, like where does the object meet the subject? Where does the apparent object meet the apparent subject, right? So you can even use the precision of inquiry still here to elucidate this. But it has to do with availability to experience. Without availability to experience, that inquiry won't go very far. It'll stay intellectual, right? So this is why it's helpful to work to various degrees with shadow material and reactivity to calm that restless spirit. Because if you don't calm the restless spirit will keep you in your mind. It will stay up here. So that's what I mean by availability. Whatever you need to do to become available, do it. And a lot of times this is not about obscure spiritual work. It's about down and dirty shadow work. So when that availability, the sensitivity of it gets turned up. This line keeps coming to me from William Stafford's poem, And it's about not letting the fragile sequence break. It's a fragile sequence. Someone who had a shift, an awakening here just a few days ago, we were talking, and she said, it's fragile. I said, it is. It is fragile, and it's also not. It's fragile at first, for sure. It's fragile in that it's subtle. It's fragile in that it was so elusive for so long because of the loudness of the mind. But once you taste it, you know it's really there. It's really real in the way the mind isn't really real, in the way thoughts aren't really real. It has a more real than real flavor to it, right? That's the fragile sequence. And if we're willing to see, feel, hear, taste, smell without letting the fragile sequence break, then we are available to the deeper insight, the deepening insight. And it's also not a practice. It's just being here, fully available. When sitting, when walking, when working, washing dishes, gardening, whatever you're doing. The fragile sequence is there. It's in the flowers. It's in the color. It's in the shape. It's in the textures of the soil in your fingers, through your fingertips. It's in the breath. It's in the feeling of anger. It's in the feeling of grief. That's the fragile sequence. And I suppose approaching this with a degree of reverence is really helpful. Reverence in the mystery. It's a complete mystery how this all happens in a way, right? And even if you think you know how it happens, it's rather a mystery how you came to this in the first place. How'd that happen, right? How'd that book get dropped in your lap, or how did you see that right video, or how did you, when there was a tragedy in your life, how did you somehow turn toward truth? Whereas not everybody does, right? How did despair transform itself in your life to enlightenment? That's a mystery, right? And so how can that not bring a reverence? And with that reverence, at least for me, comes this kind of this recognition of the innocence of everything and everyone, including all aspects of suffering, all levels of suffering, even the worst, most brutal suffering that we feel, that we suffer from ourselves, that we inflict upon ourselves, and we inflict on others. All of it. This is really innocent, ultimately. But you won't know that through bypassing, of course. You only really will finally come to that recognition through going in, finding new ways to go in, finding new ways to not stay out. You may have to think outside the box. You may have to try different things. And that align, the sort of thinking outside the box, and you see, I recommend tons of different modalities. I tried new things and incorporate new things into retreats, try to find what really works. That's what I mean by thinking outside the box and trying different things that may not line up with your idea of what pure spiritual practice is, right? There's tremendous benefit in the traditions, right? Zen, Dzogchen, and so forth. There's tremendous benefit in the traditions. There are also drawbacks. One drawback is we can, for some reason, convince ourselves that it has to stay within. If it's not within what I learned in my tradition, then it's probably not something I need. I'm not comfortable with it. I don't understand it, but I certainly don't need it. Everything that I need is in this tradition, the way my teacher taught it and the way, all that, which doesn't really even have to do with the tradition or your teacher. It has to do with you. It has to do with your own rigid view. And this is what I mean is by seeing outside. And that view may not just be formed by a religious or spiritual tradition. It almost certainly won't just be formed by that. It'll be formed by your own personal proclivities, your personality, by your family, your society. And so examining all of that will come into play at some point, and seeing how those influences have shaped your experience of really yourself, but yourself is defining the world as you see it. And that's view, like fundamental view. And if you don't let the fragile sequence break and continue to let this clarity clarify itself, penetrate itself in through the sense fields, then those you'll be able to see how those views skew perception, create perception even, and that they are unnecessary. The binding of them is unnecessary. And you'll start to feel free of binding. Feel free of binding, feel free of inherent view, feel free of fixation. You'll know what that feels like. You'll know the difference. And then everything is coming forward to remind you of it. Everything is coming forward to remind you of it. You have, essentially 5 streams of sense experience to remind you at all times. And the 6th, which is cognition, which is unbound consciousness. So the reminders are everywhere now. Everywhere. They're the only thing that can be experienced. And that's really the maturity of what Shikantaza shows us. It is just enlightenment singing, as everything, and as all the suffering and all the confusion and emotions and sensations and storylines and life and death and all of the things that we perceive as humans is singing with truth. And it's also deconstructed to non-dualistic textures. Non-dualistic, not in space, not in time. Appearing, popping, disappearing. Like reality bubbles. Can't really explain that part, but and this is to know true spontaneity. That even when there's a sense of not spontaneity, or there's a sense of doership, or a sense of agency, even that really is just made out of this spontaneity. It's made out of these non-dualistic textures. Non-arising, non-departing, self-supporting, and unsupported. Yeah, and Shikantaza at any level that I referred to there of understanding and clarity and so forth is not incompatible with anything else, by the way. It's not incompatible with koan practice, or not incompatible with mantra meditation or any of it. You could actually say it's, in one way of saying it, it's the Dharma vehicle. The Dharma treasure.